Good day. I'm Mr. Chaka. I'm here today to come and present to you the tips for the paper 2 for 2014. As we still remember that this will be our first year to deal with the new content of CAPS. Thank you very much. As I've stated, I'm Mr. Chaka, the learning facilitator of life science in Motheo district. Right, in our presentation today, we look at the content for the paper 2, and the content for paper 2s, we look at it in this way. We look at the content of papers, we look at the format of papers, and also we look at the scope. Right, let's start with the content. Under the content, this is what is going to happen. This is what is going to happen for 2014. We look in the topics, we look at the time, we look at the weightings. And in term 1, which forms paper 2, we look at the DNA code of life. It carries 19% and which is 27 marks. The second one will be the meiosis, which carries 7% and it carries 12 marks. In term 2, which also form part of paper 2, is the genetic and inheritance. It carries 30 marks. Weighting of marks is 45 marks. In term 3 is evolution through natural selection, 15% and is 23 marks. In term 3 and 4 is human evolution, it's 29% and the marks is 43. All in all, you calculate 27, 12, 45, 23, 43. They give an amount of 150. That is the paper 1. Then I want us to refer you to the contents of paper 2, that is what is entailed in the DNA code of life. Then it states as follows. Under DNA code of life, we are studying the structure. We also have to look at the DNA replication. And under DNA replication, we are also looking at transcription as well as translation. That is the DNA code of life. And then the third one will be the formation of messenger RNA. All those three, they form part and parcel of DNA code of life. And under meiosis, we look at the differences of meiotic 1 and meiotic 2. That is the first point. Number 2, we also look at the importance of meiosis. And then number 3, we look at the importance of the crossing over. I think those 3 aspects, they cover what is entailed under meiosis. Let's recap. We say under DNA code of life, we look at the structure, we look at the DNA replication, which is transcription and translation. And then thirdly, we look at the formation of messenger RNA. Then under meiosis, we look at the differences of meiotic 1 and meiotic 2. And then the second one is the importance of meiosis. And then the third one will be the importance of the crossing over. Then we went to the genetic and inheritance. Under genetic and inheritance, we're supposed to know the following under genetics. We look at the monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. We have to know monohybrid as well as the dihybrid crosses. Both of them in the exam, they are going to carry the same marks, which is plus or minus between 6 and 7 marks. And the second topic under genetic, that is the pedigree. We also have to know the pedigree and study the pedigree. And the third point will be the mutation. And the fourth point for inheritance, for genetic, that is genetic engineering. And lastly, we also have to look at the cloning. And then the last point, that is on human evolution under natural selection. Under natural selection, we look at natural selection. We say under natural selection, we have to start with the evidence of evolution. There are 5 aspects of evidence of evolution that we're supposed to study. Then after we have studied those 5 aspects of evidence of evolution, then we can come to the theories of evolution. And under the theories of evolution, then we have to understand that we have to know the 3 things under the theories of evolution. We have to know the theories of Lamarck, the theories of Charles Darwin, and also punctuated equilibrium. And under those three subheadings, then we're supposed to have a knowledge about the similarities between Lamarck's theory, Charles Darwin's theory, and punctuated equilibrium. And then after knowing the similarities, then we must also come up with identifying the differences amongst the 3. Then lastly, we look at the human evolution. Under human evolution, then we have to study differences in humans and other primates. We have to know that one. And then the second one will be the fossils of Homo sapiens and other primates. I think those are the basic things that we also have to know under those topics in terms of their papers. So we now come to the format of the paper. The format of the paper, as it is written in the papers, it is the same with paper 1. So you look at paper 1, you are going to do the same thing with paper 2. Right? The format of the paper is that there will be 3 sections. It will be section A, section B, section C. And section A, it carries 50 marks. Section B, it carries 40 marks, and which is that 40 marks by 2. And then there is variety of question types. 2 questions of 40 marks each, divided into 3 to 4 subsections. In other words, it can be 2, 4, 6, 8 in terms of 20 marks each, those subsections. And then section C, it's an essay, and the essay is 20 marks. We look at the cognitive levels. This one is the one that is expected in the question papers. The 8 questions, which is the recall questions, the questions that needs the content, that most learners need to get marks from them. They carry 40%, which is the recall of facts. And then a B-type category is a comprehension, understanding and describe of events, terms, and processes. In other words, it also has to do with what you have learned, and then you come and also put it in your own understanding and describe of, and the description of the events, terms, and also the process. Category C, it needs applications. You use the knowledge in new context. In other words, you have been given a new context, and then you are using your knowledge in that in order to answer it, which carries 20%. And then number D, category D, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, which carries 15 marks percent. Then the keyword, what is important in these examination papers is that we have to look at the keywords. The keywords, they play a vital role in terms of answering, in terms of understanding what is that which is expected of you. That is why it is so important that when you write, please, whenever you are reading whatever the statement, read it carefully and understand what is expected from you. Then there are keywords that are being used. One of the keywords that are common in paper, you'll find them in paper 1, you'll find them in paper 2. They will say separate. In other words, they say analyze, When you analyze, it means what is required is that you must separate, you must examine, you must interpret the information. And in some instances, you'll also find a situation of saying, a keyword of saying, calculate. When you calculate, it's when a numerical answer is required. In other words, calculations that is needed. And the calculations, we know they are carries about 3 marks in each and every type of calculations. You should show how you are working, especially where 2 or more steps are involved. Then your calculation should be shown in whatever you are answering. The third keyword will be the classify. When you classify, when you have some keywords in the statement that you'll be reading, when they say classify, it means they group things based on common characteristics. You'll be placing things according to common characteristics. And then the fourth one will be to compare. When you compare, it means you'll be pointing out, or you show both similarities and differences between things, concepts or the phenomenon. That will be the keyword. Then as we move on, there is define. In each and every paper, you always define. You give a clear meaning. You define what is population. You define what is species. You define what is transcription. In other words, when you find that, then you have to explain in details. And the fifth keyword will be to describe. In question paper, every time you have to describe. And then when you describe, it means you must state in words. You must state in words, using the diagram where maybe the diagram has been used, the main points of a structure, the process, the phenomenon, or the investigations. The other one will be to determine. When you determine, you will also be expected to calculate something or to discover the answer by examining evidence from the keyword determine. Then the other one will be differentiate. When you differentiate, you use differences to qualify the categories, like differentiating the categories or the theories of Lamarck and Charles Darwin. Then discuss. Under discuss, you consider all information and reach a conclusion. In other words, you'll be discussing and you'll be giving the information, and at the end, you need to reach a conclusion when there is a keyword involving discuss. And then explain. When you explain, you make a clear statement, you interpret, or you spell out what is expected of you. And then the other one will be identify. You name. Under identify, you name the essential characteristics. Label, identify on a diagram or a drawing. When you identify on a diagram or a drawing, you make sure whatever you'll be labeling, it does not cross over the other. So because in that way it will be wrong. Then lastly, we have list. You write a list of items with no elaboration. In other words, you just give without giving. You just mention them without giving an elaboration, without explaining them. Then mention. When you mention in the statement of saying, maybe mention so and so points based on evidence of evolution, you refer to the relevant points, like those 5 aspects of evidence of evolution. Then you mention them and you also explain. Name, state something, alternative keywords, you give or you identify or you mention. When the question says state, it means you write down information without discussion. You just state it as it is. Suggest, under suggest, you offer an explanation or a solution. In other words, you offer an explanation or a solution in your own ways in terms of the question. Then tabulate. When you tabulate, you draw a table and indicate the answers as direct pairs. In other words, you compare. In other words, please, whenever it is said tabulate, you make a table, and the table should have 2 points that you are comparing, and there should be a direct pairs. In other words, you cannot compare the leg and the foot on this other side. So it should be the same. And then there are marks for only drawing a table. Only drawing a table, it will be 1 mark. And then plus maybe the 2 marks that is expected, 2 marks on this side and 2 marks on that other side, then it will be 5 marks. Under section B, how to answer longer questions. You always have to read through the questions and you underline the verbs. In other words, you don't just look at the questions once and then you are done and then you started answering. You underline the verb, you use the fact, explanation, and example formula so as to understand. After you have given those, you give a fact, you write down the facts, then you give your explanation. And where it is needed, you can also give examples. In this case, we all know that in each and every paper there are case studies. When you answer the case study, you look at the following points. You look at the heading and the picture to get an idea of what the case study is all about. Before you can go any further, you have to look at the heading and interpret the pictures to get an idea of what the case study is all about. Secondly, you read through the case study carefully and slowly with understanding. With understanding, reading each and every part of the case study. You read each question and underline the keywords. In this case, you're now starting with questions now. You read each question and underline the keywords under the question or the verb. Fourthly, you read the case study again. You go back and read the case study again and underline each of the keywords in the case study. And the 6 points that now you start answering and pay special attention to the action verb. And look at the mark allocation. Whenever you are answering, you must always look at the mark allocation. And you should not give more than what is expected because it will be time wasting. There are also how to answer data response questions. When you look at the data response questions, you look at the whole picture. The data response questions, you look at the picture, you look at the graph or the diagram, and you look at what do you see. You ask yourself, what do you see there? You look at the heading and the picture to get the idea of the topic. Look at any other symbol that may be important in that data response questions. And you look in any other symbols that may be important. Read any text that is provided. Read each question and underline the keywords also, like the same you were answering the case study. And then you read the graphs or diagrams again and select needed information. Write down the answers and provide reasons for your answers. You'll also look at the mark. And whenever you'll be answering on case study and data response questions, you must also look at the allocation of mark, the depth of the information that you're supposed to give. And then we come to section C, which is the essay. Section C is the essay, and it carries 20 marks. I think we know that. In most cases, when we advise learners, we say, it is not wrong if sometimes you want to start with your fresh mind, you want to start with the essay, you can start with an essay. Not only the essay, in each and every section, in other words, whenever you want to start with section B, you can start with section B, and then you come to section C, and then you end up with section A. That is not wrong. We look at the section C that we are talking about right now. We say, where possible, start with essay questions while you are still fresh. That is the only advice that we could give. And then you unpack the question by underlining the different instructions. Under section A, you have section C. You have to unpack the question. You have to underline the different instructions. And then the step that is following after that, you plan your essay first. You make yourself a mind map as to how are you going to answer this. You make a mind map, or you can also make the subheadings that you think maybe they are suitable for that. The essay consists of 3 parts: introduction, the body, and the conclusions. Then if you'll be having those in mind, then you can start writing your essay. The essay, the body of the essay, hints and tips. Break up the information into logical parts and give as given in the question, and discuss each part in its own paragraph. The maximum marks obtained for the essay is 17 marks, and the synthesis for the essay is 3 marks. In other words, you have to give 17 facts. And during marking, for the logic, that the synthesis that we have done, then we'll be allocating 3 marks for each and every aspect of synthesis. And there are 3 aspects of synthesis. Right? Those 3 aspects of synthesis, they are as follows. It's a relevance, it's logical sequence, comprehensive. In other words, in the information that you give, did you give all the information that is needed? Did you provide all the information that is needed, relevant to the topic? Then if you did that, then you'll get your 1 mark. Under logical sequence, ideas are arranged in a logical, in a cause-effect sequence. If they are, then you'll get your mark. C, which is comprehensive, all aspects required by the essay have been sufficiently addressed, then you'll get your mark. So in most cases, people tend to get 1 mark for relevance, and for logical sequence it also becomes a problem, and as well as the comprehensive one. So when you look at those marks, mark allocation is 1 mark, 1 mark, 1 mark for the 3, which is RLC. Then we come to the graphs. We are also going to have graphs in paper 2, as we will be having graphs in paper 1. In paper 2, these are some of the examples of graphs that we are going to get. It's a line graph, and under the line graph, these are the marks for the line graph, which is plus or minus 6 marks for the line graph. If you have the criteria that we are looking at in the line graph is that if there is correct type of graph, then you get your 1 mark. Number 2, under criterion, if there is a caption, if there is a heading of the graph, then you qualify for your 1 mark. If you have also stated the x-axis correct labels and units with the correct scale, then you get your mark. The y-axis correct label and units, you also have your 1 mark. Then under plotting of points, if you have 1 mark of 9 points, then you plot it correctly, then you'll also get your 2 marks. If your 1 mark. If 2 marks, if you get 2 marks, that is all 10 points plotted correctly, you qualify for your 2 marks. If 1 out of 9 is correct, then you also get your 1 mark. Then this is the example. This is how we are going to mark the line graph. Those are the sections where the line graph is going to be marked. You look at it, it has the x-axis, it has the y-axis, it has also the caption of the graph. And the scale that has been used there is the same in terms of the y-axis and the x-axis, one scale. So it is very important in this examination that you bring along your ruler. You don't use any other instrument in terms of bringing the correct scale. Bring along your ruler in order to get your full marks. Then we go to the histogram. The histogram, it also carries 6 marks. In the histogram, the same as like in the line graph. The correct type of graph, you qualify for 1 mark. The heading, the correct 1 mark. The x-axis is also marked. The y-axis is also 1 mark. Plotting of bars. Plotting of bars depending on how did you plot them. 2 marks, let's go to the 2 marks. The 2 marks, all 12 bars plotted correctly, then you get your 2 marks. If 1 is plotted out of 11, then you get your 1 mark. And this is more or less how the histogram is going to be. This is the example of the histogram. The histogram, it has to have the same scale, the same size, in other words. And we look at them, they are all equal. If you look at those scales in terms of the first scale, the second one, and the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one, they all have the same size. So even in this way, we still mark for the heading, we mark for the x-axis, we mark for the y-axis, we also mark for the plotting of the histogram. Then the bar graph, when you look at the bar graph, how does the bar graph differ from the histogram? The histogram, all the bars, they are attached to each other, but in the bar graph, they are separated. They are in this case, you'll find them in this case. This one is a histogram. And then we come, I wanted to explain this one, sorry, this one of the bar graph. And in the bar graph, you'll find it in this way. You'll find them, there is a space in between, and then we still mark them the same way like we have been marking the line graph, we have been marking the histogram, whereby we have the suitable caption, we are marking the x-axis units, the y-axis units, and the plotting also of the bar graphs, so we also have to give them marks for them. And then looking at the pie chart, the criteria of marking the pie chart. In this one, I will also advise you for this exam again, once more. Bring along your protractor. Bring along your protractor, which will give you the correct scale. Bring along your protractor, and then the criteria that is being used there, that is the calculation, they're working to determine the correct proportions. Otherwise, if all the calculations are correct, then you get your 3 marks. If 1 is not correct, then you get your 2 marks. If we get 1 correct calculations, that 1 mark. The caption also, you must also give the suitable caption of the pie chart. And the proportion accurate for each sector must also be labeled. And this is the example. This is the example of the bar graph that you're supposed maybe to draw in the exam. And you'll only get this if all your calculations are correct. Then you can be able to draw a correct pie chart. Examination guideline. Make sure you see one and ask maybe your teacher before you go for the exam and see maybe how can they possibly assist you in terms of being able to read alone when you are at home. Examination guideline, it also assists in terms of what is that are you supposed to read, and you'll see how far are you supposed to read in terms of each part of every part of the content. And then how to use examination guideline. You look at the main topic section, the DNA code of life, and then you look at the topic that is the DNA. You have to know the location, you have to know the structure, you have to know the functions. And then the core content to be covered, you state where DNA is located as follows. Make up the genes on chromosomes. And then what learners must know in terms of the DNA code of life. Be able to explain or to describe. Be able to identify. Be able to draw. Be able to apply knowledge. And then lastly, be able to describe the history of the discovery of DNA. In other words, this is what learners need to look at in terms of using examination guideline. And there are other learners that are also using the study guidelines. In terms of the study guidelines, you will always find the mind maps. And in study of the guidelines, you will always find the mind map. In other words, you pick up every topic. You pick up every topic of the syllabus. Then you start giving each and every aspect that you think it is relevant in terms of knowing what is all about the topic. We make an example here with the nucleic acid. So everything that comes to mind about the nucleic acid, you know there is the structure of DNA and RNA. You know there are mutations that you need to look at there. You know there are protein synthesis that you look at there. There is a history of discovery under nucleic acid. There is also DNA replication. In other words, you can come up with any aspect that you want to know under that topic. And then by so doing, you will be answering yourself and giving information in terms of each and every part that we have labeled in the mind map. Right. These are just examples sometimes when you want to study mutations, having your other learners might not use the mind map. They sometimes use tables. When you are using a table, you can use a table in this way. You point out DNA point mutation. And then in that table, the first thing that you have to ask yourself is the type and how and the consequence. Under mutations, we have DNA point mutation. The type is inversion. And how it changed sequence. And what are the consequences? Wrong amino acids and protein chain forms. In other words, you look at the table that you are going to ask yourself question in order to answer that. This is a useful way to learn large amount of information that will make it easy for you to be able to grasp it very fast. Here we have such an example of fundamentals, the basics, to unpack the question paper. Sometimes other learners unpack the question that is asked, underline the action, and verbs such as outline, analyze, evaluate, apply, calculate, etc. Those are the fundamentals. Those are the basics that we normally do when we are answering questions. When you come across any question, you underline the action verbs such as outline, analyze, evaluate, apply, calculate, etc. Then you start answering. you must know your keywords of all the topics. Where they say analyze, then you must know what is expected. Evaluate, then you must also know what is expected of you. Or apply your information on this. Or calculate. In other words, know your keywords in order to answer all the topics in the papers. Know how to use formulas or calculations and show all your workings. In terms of calculations, you must be able to show all your working. You must be able to show all your calculations. Know all your content. Hint about your answers. Don't just write down everything. In other words, in terms of answering. In terms of the methods, we have just divided this into engagement. And then we say engagement, that is the method one. This is how we normally study, and this one is generally known. When you are studying, you use question papers from previous years. And then sometimes after we have studied, you use some questions in order to see how far can you answer those questions. After studying the content, use it and short test, and you give yourself short test. You focus on challenging content. You identify in the question analysis. And then from there, you start from now and then go into the what? You check your study guide, you check your textbook, and see how far you can best answer that question again, that challenging question. Or was it in June, or it was in the trial exam, or it was in March paper. Then you go back again and see how best can you answer it. You discuss any common problem that may have emerged with a study buddy. In other words, when you are studying with someone, you study any common problem that may have emerged with a study buddy, then you are advising each other in that way. And engagement number 2, which is method number 2, sometimes when you are studying, you can use some quiz between you and your buddy. This method is very useful. Like you practice section A questions. Both of you answer the same question and then mark each other. You change the answers. You give your buddy to mark you, and then you also mark your buddy. Just give enough time to answer the questions. Discuss the solutions in details. How did you arrive to those answers? So that for you, you benefit both of you. Right, engagement, which is method number 3. If you are more than 2, you can use a scoreboard for the quiz. If you are more than 2, you can also use a scoreboard. In the first activity, you'll give yourself the score. In the second activity, you also give yourself. In each and every activity that you'll be doing, you'll be giving yourself scores in terms of how did you answer in this one, how much did you get in that one, and then at the end, you count the score, then you see more or less what is your position in terms of answering that specific part of the content. We come to the study tips. These are examples of the study tips that we have here for you to prepare yourself. We say prepare a study timetable. We know when we come to this situation, people are moving up and down. They don't know where to start and so on. But the best way is to have the timetable. And the timetable will be the one that will direct you. And it will give you a clear position on whether you are going forward or backward. So always use a study timetable. Number 2, get yourself a study buddy. Get somebody that you are going to read together, so that when you arrive at some difficult concepts, then you are able to share ideas. Number 3, make use of various previous question papers while you study a topic and test yourself. While you are still studying, maybe you are studying under DNA Code of Life, make sure from each and every previous question papers you are answering questions based on that and see how far do you understand that. This will enable you to know how the topic can be asked differently in section B as well as in section C. And there are extra resources that we normally provide people with. There's extra resources. The first one is the ICTIs broadcast. This one, it is found in certain schools, but we have asked schools to share the information. If your school is not having this, it means you can even visit the other school in order to join other learners of the so-called school where you will be able to see this. But as far as this ICTIs broadcast is concerned, each and every part of the topic has been taken into consideration. Each and every school is having some CDs where they can play these CDs for their learners, and for revision's sake, learners can also be able to use them. And there are also some study guides that are available in the website of education that learners can be able to access them, and they can also use them, they mind the gap. And there are also 3-in-1 series study guides, which is available. And also that one, learners can also be able to use them. The mindset notes, as I've mentioned earlier, they can use them. Previous year question papers and the memos, they can also be used for revision. And lastly, as we are moving towards the end, we are saying on the day of writing, as the last tip that will be given to you, try to be at the exam room just before they enter so that you can wish them luck. Be calm and ease the nerves. So if you come late, if you find other learners being seated, reading their question papers, the only thing that you do normally when you just come in, you will think that you are behind and you'll start rush answering the questions. And then at the end, when you realize that, when you start rereading the questions, you start realize that you have made mistakes in most of the questions that you have been answering, just because of arriving late. If possible, give a short encouragement to your study buddy or your study buddies. They will then do their best for you. On conclusion, all of the strategy and plans mentioned will require a careful planning from your side. Stick to it. Move according to your strategies. Move according to your timetable. Good luck for the last stretch. Remember, plan your work and then work your plan. Thank you.